In film, the image of dystopia can provide insight into the fears of societal change. The subgenre of science fiction commonly displays anxiety for the future of humanity. This common concern is strikingly similar in Fritz Lang's 1927 film Metropolis and Ridley Scott's 1982 film Blade Runner. Despite the 55-year difference between the two, both movies display societal fears through similar means. When comparing Metropolis and Blade Runner, these science fiction films demonstrate how the fears of dystopia adapt or remain the same throughout societal and historical change over time. Fritz Lang's Metropolis takes place in the year of 2026 in a city, or polis, which is inspired by New York City. The film's dystopic fears reflect the societal characteristics that Weimar Germany faced during the late 1920s. Noted in Zoe Cordelou's essay titled From Metropolis to Blade Runner, Modernism and Postmodernism in Science Fiction Cinema, she elaborates that what characterized that period was politics, religion, occult, aesthetics, technological advances, and social life in the era of mass entertainment, but also misery and pessimism over the situation after World War I. These elements are incredibly apparent in the film. Oppressed industrial workers are seen worshipping Evil Maria after her sexual demonstration to such an extent that they are inspired to extreme riots. The introduction of a new political leader that churns up Metropolis' society provides social commentary into the rise of Nazi regimes. Therefore, the science fiction format and image of dystopia helps provide a platform for social commentary on 1920s Germany. Although these anxieties may only be apparent to the early 20th century, Metropolis indeed shares similar concerns for the future that Blade Runner comments upon 55 years later. Ridley Scott's science fiction film is set in the near future of 2019 Los Angeles. During the 1980s, America felt particularly threatened by the rise of communism in the Soviet Union and fearful of the rapid technological advancements of Japan. With Blade Runner's physically divided class structure and complex technology such as flying cars and replicants, it is clear that the dystopic setting provides insight into America's fears at the time. Society's anxiety towards the change of women's status, technology, and urbanism can be analyzed when comparing these two masterpieces of cinema. Both Metropolis and Blade Runner express distaste with the future status of women. However, they contrast in their outlook on feminist theory. In Metropolis, the robotic Maria represents the femme fatale. She embodies the hypersexualized patriarchal view of women. In the end, when Robot Maria is burned at the stake, it can be interpreted to explain the fears of women's empowerment that was apparent at the time. When taking a historical perspective of the 1920s, researchers first began scientifically exploring sex, cinema was parading barely dressed sex symbols on the silver screen, and the flapper gave birth to sexual empowerment. Metropolis shows how societies were distasteful of female sexual liberation and feared the consequences it withheld. Only when the femme fatale is burned at the stake like a heretic can balance be restored in Metropolis' society. Although the only women represented in Blade Runner are prostitutes or robots created to be subservient, upon further analysis of the female characters, the film appears to actually be commenting upon the negative effects of female stereotypes. When comparing Rachel to Person Zora, it becomes apparent that this version of a dystopia only supports the women who submit to male dominance. Rachel, because she submits to Deckard in the role she has been programmed to follow, is allowed to continue life as a replicant because she aligns with the status quo. On the contrary, Person Zora must be terminated because they do not follow their subservient expectations. During the 1980s, difference feminism, which acknowledged the differences between men and women to be both valuable and therefore equal, was gaining popularity. Blade Runner warns women about gender stereotypes and how they can be used to oppress women, like Rachel, in the future. When contrasting Blade Runner's outlook on the feminist theory to Metropolis, it is apparent how the change over time in the subgenre of science fiction gives insight as to how the status of women has developed throughout history. Although Metropolis and Blade Runner may have polar ideas about feminism, they share the same unease towards extreme technological advancement. As Zoe Cordelou explains in her same essay, both films reflect the machine as an obedient, passive servant to man, or as an untamable destructive force. The fears of the moral repercussions of creating a sentient machine remained the same throughout the 55-year gap between the two films. In Metropolis, the real Maria and evil Maria are impossible to tell each other apart, which is why evil Maria is so successful at sexually seducing the workers into rebellion. She embodies the dystopian nightmare of machines destroying and replacing all humans. The 1920s can be characterized by its numerous inventions created after World War I, like the Model T Ford, assembly lines, instant cameras, and television. Considering the historical changes that occurred at the time, particularly those which affected factory jobs, it's no wonder why society feared the machine and its potential to replace mankind. The 1980s also experienced breakthrough technological advancements within its decade. Characterized by personal computers, the internet, Walkmans, and cell phones, it is logical that society feared such life-changing developments. Blade Runner's replicants express unease with extreme technological advancement. After all, replicants have the same eyes and brain as a human. As Zoe Cordelou points out in her same essay, the important difference between humans and replicants is that the latter have only a 4-year lifespan and they lack personal history. The dystopian universe that Blade Runner exists within can only distinguish man from machine according to personal history in the past. Similar to Metropolis, the themes communicate the fear of technological power to create mankind itself, making man and machine indistinguishable. Furthermore, both Metropolis and Blade Runner contain a common element of science fiction, urbanism. In fact, the cityscape of both films is strikingly similar. In Sophia Rao's paper titled Representations of Dystopia and Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, she analyzes Blade Runner's Los Angeles is a visually stunning but bleak vision of the future. Its towering skyscrapers and large advertising screens show a society consumed with commerce. The city is reminiscent of that in Fritz Lang's Metropolis. When looking at a shot of the police station building in Blade Runner, it is all too similar to the main building in Metropolis. Yet, their common architecture shares more commonalities than just appearances. Sophia Rao continues to write, the narratives divide between the ruling classes who live at the top with the factory workers underneath also bears resemblance. The image of a vertically segregated society is an element of dystopia that remained the same throughout the 55-year difference in the movies. In Metropolis, the workers live underground and must take an elevator up to the middle section of the city to go do their factory jobs. At the top lives a carefree wealthy class. In Blade Runner, the ground-level streets are overcrowded with several impoverished merchants. However, at the top floor of the pyramid-shaped Tyrell Corporation lives the wealthiest class and creators of replicants. This city planning shows how both societies felt a sense of inevitable vertical segregation. In summation, the dystopic setting that is shared by these two science fiction films both elaborated on the fear of the future regarding the status of women, technology, and urbanization. Over the historical changes that occurred between the 1920s and 1980s, the support of feminism has changed throughout society. Nevertheless, the anxiety of the moral repercussions of man-like machines and vertical segregation of the cityscape remained the same. Ultimately, the subgenre shared by both films fully allowed them to communicate a universal fear of a future where machine triumphs over man and the ruling class enslaves the working poor.